Hey guys, it's Patrick Hall with Fstoppers.com. In a minute, we're going to sit down with Pi Jerza to look at all of your submissions for last month's Critique the Community featuring wedding images.
Dude, I freaking love this shot. Like, I would completely disagree with everything you just said.
But first, I want to quickly give you an update on the newest contest that we're featuring. You can go to fstoppers.com/contest to enter. The theme for the month of April is going to be portraits, and we have some incredible prizes featuring a lighting kit from Westcott, some incredible software from DxO, and of course, all of our tutorials from fstoppers.com/store. If you enjoy this kind of content, do us a favor and subscribe to the channel below. But for now, let's welcome Mr. Pi Jerza. All right, so here we are. We're with Pi Jerza from SLR Lounge and Linen Jerza Weddings. How are you doing today?
I'm good, my friend.
It's been a while. Last time I saw you, you were actually in this studio competing with me here in Puerto Rico. And if you haven't seen that video, you could probably go to the link below and I'll put a link to that. But we are teaming up with you today to help critique some wedding images that we've picked out. I've picked out 13 images here. And in today's critique, we're going to be giving third place a tutorial from the Fstoppers store. We're going to be giving away a Loop Deck CT for the second prize winner. And the grand prize winner, tell us about that prize, Pi.
We're giving away a seat to our 12-month business mentorship program for aspiring wedding or portrait photographers. So basically, people that want to build a successful business around photography.
Awesome. Yeah, I've looked into it, and to be able to learn from you would be such an asset. It's a group setting. How exactly does it work?
It's a group mentorship environment, and it's absolutely awesome. Like, we're approaching 100 members right now, and yeah, it's so far from their feedback, it's unlike anything that they've ever seen. And that's what we're aiming for. We're aiming for just a incredible 12-month mentorship program that goes beyond what, you know, a master's level education in a university would give you, but all focused to helping you build a successful photography business and sustainable one.
And the title of it, is it just 12-month mentorship? Or
10K for 2K. So it's a $10,000 mentorship program that we offer for $2,000. Which we're giving away a seat. So it's a $2,000 mentorship program. Definitely worth joining.
Well, in the past, when we've had guests on, we've allowed them to pick the winners of each prize. So we'll probably do that. Maybe I'll pick one of the winners as well. So we'll do that at the end. We're going to go ahead and start this critique off with the highest rated. This is actually not the highest rated image. This is the second highest rated image, but the highest rated image was from the same photographer, and I actually thought this image was a little bit more exciting. So this image was taken by Manolo Sierra, and let me just read this real quick. When taking photos of wedding dances, capturing movement and ambient light can be challenging due to the many things happening at the same time. I captured this genuine joy of the newlywed couple using external flashes with my Nikon D5. So not a lot of technical info on how this image was taken, but maybe we'll leave that up to you and me.
I mean, it looks gorgeous. What are we doing? We're critiquing?
For the rating system, it's been a while since you've been on the show. A 1 is a snapshot, meaning literally any person with any camera could probably take the image. A 2 is an image that had some thought put into it, but still needs a lot of work before it hits your portfolio. A 3 is a solid image, which is actually a very good rating. I know a lot of people think that there's not a lot of 4s and 5s, but a 3 is an image that you and I would both be happy to take and put in our portfolio. A 4 is an outstanding image that really rises to the top. And then a 5 is kind of world-class, an image that will probably remain in your portfolio forever, and maybe an image that's so good that it will kind of become the branding to your own brand and marketing. So I don't know how many 5s we're going to see. Those are kind of rare. If you want, before we go and talk detail, do you want to go ahead and rate this image here?
All right. I think I am ready.
3, 2, 1... I just said how hard a 5 is, but for me, this is an unbelievable image. I don't really have to persuade you because you just threw the same score. So why don't you go ahead and tell me what you think is going on here, why you like it, and why this is one of the highest rated images we ever give on the critique.
Yeah, I mean, this image, it hits home on so many levels. I will say this. I know just from looking at it that a big portion of this image is actually generative fill. So most likely the frame actually ends. Do you see where the blur begins and like the two lights? So if you crop in, most likely the frame is going a little bit tighter.
You're talking about like right over here.
Yeah,
I can't control the crop exactly on this viewer, but you're saying like somewhere right here on the edge of the dress, maybe?
Yeah, so scroll to the middle of the image and just zoom in. I would say that that's the original crop or very close to it. like somewhere around there is probably the original crop.
That's
And then they're
interesting. You
pulling
can
out and you
see
can,
right here where it starts to unnaturally blur a little bit.
yeah. And especially if you look at the bottom of the dress, I'm
Uh,
only, obviously go scroll to the very bottom of the dress. You'll see the kind of manipulation there. Um, obviously like, I don't think that's a big deal from a client's perspective. And that's why to me, this is still like a 5 because the moment is perfect. Like the expression on them, you've got the two kind of backlights that are lighting them up. It's also lighting up the confetti in the air. It's a beautiful composition, getting slightly lower so that you can get the this overhead chandelier and seeing all the guests behind them. So it's a great moment and kind of a perfect candidate for this to kind of widen it out and make it a bit more dramatic in that. But I love it. This is one of those images that like not only could be potentially award winning. I don't know if depending on some awards, they're not going to be cool with the generative AI, but it's definitely one of those that like it needs to sit front and center on a website because it's so impactful. It's such a great capture and it has the perfect expression on her, and it's just great. It's a beautiful image.
yeah, when taking these type of photos, a lot of it is luck. You just happen to be on this side. Your lights are placed where they are. So you have some thought going into it. So you strategically place yourself here. But the luck comes in to where this twirl, the spinning of the dress, all of this happens with the bride facing the camera, right? Like
Totally.
if the guy was facing the camera, it'd probably have a little bit less of an impact.
Totally. That's a tricky shot. And you can set yourself up for success, but usually to get this type of shot, I'll pop 60, 70 shots while they're like in the middle of the dance. And one of them has this, but that where you were zoomed in right there looked like the original crop. And so it was a good idea to kind of, it looks like they added a little bit of like a tilt shift blur to the outside edges and burned it down. And that was a good idea so that you kind of minimize the generative fill.
Yeah, it's interesting. It almost has like a film burn effect here, and like the blacks are going red, and then you kind of have that classic yellow color here. It's going to be interesting to see more generative fill, not just in photography in general, but in this critique, because I don't think we've been doing this critique very long since that has become such a staple in people's workflow. I mean, I use it all the time, but it brings up an interesting idea. Girls are so particular about their dress and everything that what if the bottom of the dress didn't really look like this? Or will the bride ever think that the dress is too ballooned up? And, a lot of times the bride and your client see things differently and through a different lens than what we see as photographers. So
for sure.
You said you don't really have a problem with it, but I could see a lot of people out there, especially the clients, kind of feeling like, well, maybe they went a little too far, because if you were to find this original crop, it's still a 5-star image, even without the fill.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I was thinking from the perspective of like the dress was a really long and large dress anyway. So like when you do this effect, it doesn't look like it's not the dress, but you're absolutely right. If the dress like kind of cut off at a much lower place and it didn't have this like opening up kind of train effect, I think a lot of clients would be potentially unhappy with that because it's not really representative of what they were wearing. So it kind of makes it a little bit less real. For sure. I didn't even think about that, and I agree with you completely.
Then there's probably some clients who wouldn't even notice it until years later, and they'd start to think, did my dress have that thing on the bottom? Or what's, like sometimes the clients are, less in tune with the photography element, and they kind of miss things that, like, I'm shocked you picked that out right off the bat. I mean, that's a pretty good eye. So this image was taken
This is by my friends.
Oh, you know who this photographer is?
Absolutely. They're actually part of our programs.
Uh-oh. They disqualified from winning your mentorship then?
I'm not sure if they're in the mentorship. They were part of our premium education, but
well, it's going to look awfully fishy if you know only them and then they win at the end. So this was Jesse Jackson. This was taken at the Bonneville Salt Flats in Utah with a Nikon D6 II, 24-70, 2.8 lens. We used 3 GT200 flashes. One of them was used with the MagSphere mag grid at half CTO gel overhead to light the couple. The other 2 were placed in the corners to add a bit of light on the ground, and then edited with their own custom preset. 13-second shutter here, so pretty cool looking image.
That's beautiful. And Jesse and Dallin are awesome photographers. They're a husband and wife couple that do fantastic work. And and they hail from we both hail from the same hometown. So
Now you have
no,
some pictures, I think, of you and your kids and stuff at the same salt flat. Every time I
yeah,
think of
yeah,
salt flats, I think of, is it Bolivia, where everyone goes in South America?
yeah. No, in Salt Lake City they have in Salt Lake City, or it's like an hour away from Salt Lake City. They have the Bonneville Salt Flats, which is a fantastic photo location. Great spot too to get nighttime skies because you don't have a lot of light pollution. This is a beautiful image. You want to rate it?
Let's go for it.
All right.
3, 2, 1. I'm going 4. You're going 4 as well.
Yes, sir.
Do you spot any generative fill in this image?
Not in this one. I mean, if they did use it, it's even more subtle, and that's how I like to use generative fill, is like in a very subtle way that you can't really tell. But I love the image. I think this, like, to be honest, it's a fantastic image, and I'm torn a little bit between like a 4 and a 5. I love the pose, how they're kind of looking up towards the stars. They're lit from above, so it's kind of like coming from the sky as opposed to like, and they most certainly like either masked out the light, or they just use generative fill to replace the light. So they did a really great job with this, from the pose to kind of everything about it. The only thing for me that like makes it maybe not a 5 would be like, it'd be cool if there was a bit of foreground elements or something else in the composition. That's tough though, because you're at the salt flat, so there's nothing else to kind of like shoot through. There's nothing else to incorporate. So it's a very nitpicky thing. That's why I'm kind of like, look, it's a portfolio image. This belongs, like, again, right there in your front and center on a website. It's a beautiful. I'm between a 4 and a 5, but that's the only thing where I'm like, it'd be cool if there's a little bit something extra there in the composition. Do I know what that would be? No, because it's like it's the salt flats.
How do you think they took this image? Do you think this was a styled shoot that they went out there, or there's no way that they're being pulled away from a reception, right? Like there's no way this is the wedding day itself unless they eloped and it's just the two of them.
Yeah, usually shoots like this are day after sessions. It could be a styled shoot, I don't know, but they're usually, if it's with the couple, it's a day after session where like the wedding has passed, and they get dressed back up, and you take them out to like a very special location to do shots that you can't do on the wedding day. A shot like this is typically going to be, you'll do one shot of them that's lit and the sky will be mostly blacked out. And while they're standing there, you'll do the second shot while basically you're exposing for the sky, and then you'll mask the two in. So you'll mask the sky into the other shot. And it's usually pretty simple because you want the sky to kind of black out in the first shot. And it's a pretty simple mask, especially with like all the AI masking tools now.
Yeah, just the only thing I can add to this is kind of what you were saying. Instead of them really like looking at each other, I do like that they're looking up at the heavens and looking at the stars, and it kind of feels more like they're experiencing the wonder as well, as opposed to the super romantic image where they're just looking at each other and you got the crazy sky. And I also feel like the post-production on this isn't so over the top. We see a lot of night shots with landscapes, and everyone wants to just crush the blacks and boost up the colors and, make the highlights really intense, and it just looks really fake.
Yeah.
This looks more like a more natural long exposure sort of image.
Absolutely. And you can tell it's most likely a long exposure and not like, because you could always just go and grab a sky and just drop it into the image. This most likely is actually the long exposure, because you can actually see the star trails forming a little bit around the outside edges, which looks like it's about like a 13, 15-second shutter. So it looks like it's actually the sky from the scene. And it's a beautiful job. Is that the Milky Way that's kind of framed right above them is really nice. It kind of draws the attention in.
And I love the use, you were talking about maybe generative fill blocking something, a light stand or something, but I love the use of the strobes kind of sending these little streaks in the background, It just adds some interest. It's really clever to highlight kind of the horizon. It's near the horizon, and it kind of gives that depth of field that's really nice. It's so easy to take images like this and everything's just black,
Yeah.
And your subject is strobed, and then it looks flashy with no ambient light. They've done a really good job of adding flash to kind of add some ambient light. And then the color toning, I feel like everything blends together really well.
Yeah, I think that background light might actually be like the cars and traffic over to the right side, because on the longer exposure, you'd actually start to pick some of that up. But it could be a flash too, but that's dope. Great shot, Jetsy and Dallin.
All right, this is the third image. We've moved over. Goodness, this almost looks like where you live or something.
That's beautiful.
Rita Santana, shot in May of 21. This is one of my favorite images ever during Quentin and Andrea's elopement in Cabo de Roca, Portugal. Okay, so not exactly where you are. Shot with a 5D Mark IV and a 35 millimeter lens.
It's a gorgeous shot. Man, so many good images, man. It's crazy.
And what's wild is there weren't that many submissions to this critique for some reason. I feel like wedding photography is one of the biggest genres, but I think we had about 300 submissions. So when you look at 3 submissions per person, you have like a 3 in 100 chance winning one of the prizes. So let that be a lesson to everyone submitting to the next one. You might have a greater chance of winning than you think. You ready?
Okay. Yep.
3, 2, 1. 4.
4.
This is
Why are you giving it a 4?
Well, I think, with a wedding portfolio, it's tough because I tried to go through these images and find images like this, but then also standard day of wedding images, of the reception and the dancing and stuff. Those images at the wedding are super important. They might be the most important images to sell yourself to a customer.
Sure.
But these type of images that could have been shot on the day of the wedding or are a styled shoot before or after the wedding are the ones that really stand out the most. And so I just can't imagine taking an image like this and not putting it in your portfolio.
Yeah.
But if you have too many images like this is kind of where I'm going with this. If you have too many images like this, it might start to feel like all you do is take these epic shots, and are you capable of taking great photos at a less epic location or during the wedding? So I think you really need a good balance of images like this and images that show the actual day itself, because you don't want to sell your client on just this sort of stuff.
And we teach, I think most photographers kind of do this. We teach specifically, like when you approach a scene like this, think wide, medium, tight. So you take your wide shot, that sets the scene. It kind of establishes like the grandeur of something. Then you go medium to kind of show like who it is in the frame. And then you go tight to show emotions and details and all that kind of stuff. And I'm sure they're doing this. My thought of why this is a 4 versus a 5, it's so close to being a 5. To me, it's a 4 because of the posing and the action. So like the way that they're kissing right now, both faces are closed off to the camera a bit. So like we can't quite see detail in the kiss. Obviously, they know who it is because you have the ink on the shoulder. You have from the dress and the attire. But it'd be nice if they were if there was a kiss. Maybe it's leaning over a little bit to get a little more action in the shot. Maybe it's pulled apart a little bit so we can see a little bit more of the form. And the other thing that I might do in a shot like this, if you zoom back out a little bit, and this is, I would say, like a stylistic thing, because this is shot natural light and it looks gorgeous natural. They've done a great job with the edit, everything. It's one of those scenes though where I probably would have popped a little bit of a flash just to give me a little bit more separation between them and the environment. It's such a beautiful and dramatic environment. I could imagine this where if our environment was just a half a stop to one stop darker and they were lifted out a little bit, it would draw so much attention in. But I would give it a 5 either way, whether it was natural light or whether it was lit. The only difference is just the pose. To me, it just feels a little bit like we could have done something a little more grand. We could have done something that showcased their profiles, allowed us to see them a little bit better, versus right now they're a little bit closed off. I think I
totally agree with everything you just said. When I look at this image, what separates this from a 5 to me as well, and even maybe I'm at like a 3.5 even, like I'm kind of between numbers here, is exactly what you said about the exposure. I would love to see all of this pulled down just a little bit. And then if it were me, I use strobe probably more than I shoot with natural light. And my tendency would be put an assistant over here with a softbox and kind of light from the same direction as the natural light, but then be able to highlight them from the front and maybe add that detail you're talking about.
I thought the exact same thing.
Pulling down the exposure so that, the horizon and the rocks, are a little darker and they'd probably have a little bit more contrast.
As long as there's room to the left where they're not falling off the cliff.
Yeah, the composition is the one last little thing. It's like maybe I feel like there's a little too much sky And I could go a little, I don't know if I could do this in post, where it's like, you probably want that horizon.
I really like the composition the way it is. And I love how they're framed in front of that texture of those rocks. Like I really like this angle where they got up a little bit higher and they're shooting down, because it really shows off the grandeur of it. Like, when you're shooting on an ocean scene like this, a lot of times our tendency is to shoot at the same level as the couple. And when we do that, and that's fine too, but when you do that, you don't see nearly as much as the ocean. So the fact that they got up and they're kind of shooting down, I really love that. And I love the way that they're framed against the rocks. But I do agree. And this little one-stop adjustment too, this could be done in post. There's actually a specific, an Fstoppers Lightroom course that I had filmed with you guys where we show exactly how to do that, where you just select the background through the AI masking and just pull it down a little bit. You could totally do this in the edit.
I have to say that AI masking in Lightroom has changed the way I edit more than probably anything else I've ever done with photography. Because you're right, I would just pull down the whole exposure, half a stop, subject AI mask them, pop them up just a little bit, and boom, you're done.
Yeah.
It's going to look, it is natural because they're going to be lit with the same light. It's just you're tweaking, you're able to tweak layers and levels of natural light, where before Absolutely. The only way to really do that was to add strobe and have your strobe exposure and your ambient exposure. Now with AI masking, you can kind of do that just with natural light, which is super cool.
And that's exactly why when we were on our shoot during the challenge, so if you guys haven't seen that challenge, it's really fun, by the way. We did it. It's a Walmart. That was a brilliant concept that Patrick came up with. He's like, we're going to choose our wardrobe from Walmart. So we had $100 budget. We choose the wardrobe from Walmart. When we got out to the location, though, I shot most everything natural light because I'm very comfortable with those masking features. And so it's like, if I'm under a time constraint and I just want to get the maximum amount of images possible, I'm going to shoot knowing what I can do in the edit. So that's exactly what I was doing, is just shooting, knowing what I could do in the edit. I was just shooting natural light so I can get more images, more exposures, more expressions. But I would do the same thing in this scene if I approach this and it's such beautiful lighting. Especially if I have a time constraint, I might not even set up the light. I wouldn't even worry about it. I would just go, you know what? I'm just going to do this in the edit and it'll take me 30 seconds.
The one caveat I would say is sometimes you can definitely pull up the natural light more using that technique, but you can't change the light direction, or at
Correct.
least as
Correct.
easily today as maybe you will in the future. So sometimes the competition we were doing, there would be times where I just say the light is flat or it's dark, but I can pull it up. I kind of know what I can do in the edit, but I'm more practical where I want to have the light on location and maybe have the shadows coming from, a specific direction.
That's absolutely, if you want light direction or light quality, right? Because you can't manipulate light quality either. So those two things, for sure, you need to add that light.
All right, here's our next image. Do you have any idea how to pronounce his name? Madija
Marcius.
Photographed during the wedding season in Lake Sablacek in Ogolan, Croatia. This is why I always have Lee read these, because I can't pronounce any of these places. The newlyweds are standing on a plateau that I wound up removing in Photoshop with the help of AI. I also refined the left third of the photo in Photoshop, edited with Capture One in Photoshop, shot with another Nikon Z6 II. It seems to be a pretty popular camera right now. It almost looks like they're on like a little sandbar or something, but he kind of told us what happened. There must have been some land further, probably ahead of them or behind them, that he's removed or sunken under the water just a bit.
Looks like there's probably just a little bit of a rise in the sand where they could stand, and he just replaced it with water or something.
I wonder how they got out there, though. Is there like some way to walk to where they're at?
Well, I'll bet it extends out towards the edge of the frame, and he's just replaced. Okay, I got my number.
I think I'm ready as well. 3, 2, 1.
We're in sync, bro.
We're in sync.
Yeah, there's a couple things to me on this. Like, it's such a beautiful scene and a great concept. There's just a few things that hold it back for me. The very first thing is like, I'm really not a huge fan of this like Swan Lake ballet pose, unless if they're dancers, then that totally makes sense. If they're dancers, I take that back completely. That's the only time that I would do something like this kind of dramatic of a pose, is if it means something to the couple. That being said, though, immediate things that could improve this: getting lower so that her chin and their their profiles are not competing with the grass and the trees in the background. So getting lower and framing them up higher, or potentially getting higher and framing them just against the water. Either one of those would have been a fine option. Right now, they're like right across the background. It kind of like has that issue. The crop is a little bit crooked, so correcting the horizon line. But that's the big thing for me is like, I'm not a huge fan of the pose. Again, maybe that's subjective. It's more so the angle. They're caught right in between over that horizon, as opposed to framing them over something clean, which would have given us a much cleaner portrait.
I agree with everything you're saying. I'm trying to think what I would do. Like, as I zoomed in, you mentioned if they were dancers, but she kind of, I mean, she definitely is selling the role, but I feel like he is not selling the role of a professional dancer.
It doesn't quite fit, right?
Yeah, so it makes me think that they aren't dancers because, he's kind of got this, I wish he had a little bit more expression on his face, but then when I zoom out, it still makes me almost feel like she's about to topple him over, which if it were me, I would definitely be toppling over. I don't think I could pull off this image myself.
Yeah, I mean, her pose looks legit. Like, it looks like she could be a dancer, but it doesn't look like you said, it doesn't look like he knows how to. And so that's why it feels a little bit forced, maybe.
How do you feel about the wide, panoramic aspect of this shot? Like, it kind of allows them to be diminished, which maybe in some ways helps this image, but then the landscape itself isn't so incredible that, I mean, do you think you could get away with?
I like the panoramic. I just think it's the only, like I said, the only issue for me is just that they're competing against that horizon. But I do like
some AI fill as well. I mean, he mentioned AI, but like
they expanded it a little bit. It looks like it starts right where your mouse was. Go back to the left. Right there. You see that edge in the mountain? It looks like right about there.
Yeah, there's something strange going on here too.
But still, it looks natural. It doesn't look like it's you could probably massage it a little bit and improve that part of it. But
we've talked about AI a little bit. In commercial photography and certain editorial photography, stock photography, like, I don't know that I have a problem with it at all. But when you start messing with the wedding, which is kind of by nature a journalistic approach, you can be super creative by making all these fast decisions that wedding photographers like us have, learned to adapt and come up with the most creative way to shoot something. But for the most part, it's still what you're seeing is the way that it happened, And when you start adding generative fill to the bottom of a dress, which maybe isn't that big of a deal, or you start extending a landscape where maybe this landscape didn't look like this at all to the left. I mean, maybe there's a village or there's a refinery, or I don't know. Like, it's maybe landscape photography is like that too, where if you start tweaking it too much, my mind just thinks weddings and landscape should be a little bit more based in realism. Whereas if you're trying to sell a product or get someone's attention, none of that is ever real, right? It's just totally photoshopped and composited. And
I would generally agree with what you said. I do feel like that's by and large like a subjective kind of view on it. And I share the same view. Like, I don't even mind using generative fill on wedding days, so long as like what I'm adding in, it doesn't look fake. Like, to me, using generative fill, the dress is one thing. It'd also be weird if you're like doing generative fill on a group of people that are in the background, and now it's filling in people that weren't actually there. that changes, like, now these aren't your guests and the people that you invited. It's just random AI strangers. That stuff to me is but if I'm just expanding a composition, like if I shot this on the wedding day and I'm just expanding the composition, I wouldn't have an issue with that. But I do agree with you. Like, I wouldn't want to manipulate things in a way that takes it away from what the memories actually were.
That's interesting about the people in the background, because only in wedding photography do you, like, if I was to look at my wedding photos, do I go through and try to identify, like our departure shot is one of my favorite photos from our wedding. And I go through and try to say, who is that? There's a part of a face just sticking out, and that's, Aunt so-and-so, and you get it. But if all of a sudden the images are just completely rendered, in 99% of cases, nobody would care at all. But when it's your wedding, maybe you would.
Yeah. I think you would definitely care in that case.
So this is Jess Lawrence taken with the Sony A9 and the Tamron 17 to 2828. Shot ultra wide here, lit with a Godox V1 on a monopod held by an assistant. This was shot in Laboratory Mill Lincolnton. I don't know how she misspelled that. North Carolina. Departure shot. So I picked this image because this is one of those images that you do have to take almost at every wedding. And you probably want to have a system in place so that you can reproduce this type of image regardless of what the actual activity is that they do at the end.
Yeah.
Do you have a set go-to technique that you use? Is it something like this, or do you backlight your departure shots, or do you shoot with direct flash? Do you have an assistant lighting off camera from the front? What is your approach?
Well, it really depends on like what type of objects we're using as the props. Like for bubbles, backlighting is a great idea. If we're talking sparkles or sparklers, we generally will just use like a constant light, like an LED panel on the couple, and I'll actually shoot it natural. So it kind of depends, mainly because like if you backlight with sparklers, you're lighting up a lot of smoke. And the sparklers, they tend to get a lot darker, so you don't see it. You want a bright exposure where the sparklers look like sparklers. But yeah, I'm going to bring up some of the issues that I have with this kind of approach when we critique it. But what's your number?
I think I'm ready. I'm a 3 with, I would probably, at least on my computer here. How do you just get all those balloons to go off? What just happened?
It's my capture card. If I put up certain emojis, it throws up balloons. I'm between a 2 and a 3. Like if I could give it a 2.5, that's probably where I would lean.
On my screen, I have an issue with like the white balance and the color toning. It just looks like her skin's a little red and oversaturated, but that's an easy fix. I think in terms of just what's captured and the sharpness in the moment, this is one of those like high fail rate situations for me, at least. I would blast through this. And, when I was shooting weddings, I didn't have all of the great autofocus that we have today. I was still shooting on a Nikon D750 or something like that, D800. So a lot of times, you only have a few frames that were keepers in situations like this, especially if they're jumping or they do a dip or anything. So I think this is a pretty solid frame and moment critiques about this.
I do feel like the couple's going to love this shot. Okay, so it's not like the couple's not going to like it, and me giving it a 2 is not anything on that. It's more so like going back to, I guess, one of the things that you said earlier, which I agree with. Like, I don't like to manipulate scenes so much where it just looks entirely different. Like this. The blue, they're basically gelling the background. It looks like the backlight is gelled blue, or it's just left ungelled, and they're using a CTO, so an orange gel in the front. So we have a very warm couple, and then we have this blue tone in the background. And then my issue is like the balance of this is off, where like I want the background and the people to be brighter so that the bubbles are brighter, the people are brighter. And I want the subject to be a little bit brighter than background, but not like, this is like 4 or 5 stops. So my issue is that the subjects are way too bright in relation to the background. And so we lose the people, we lose a lot of the brightness in the bubbles. We just don't see a lot. And I also would have done things like, you got to do it in a hoodie and shorts in the background, and he's like right in your frame. So if you need someone like that, maybe it's because they're a vendor, or maybe it's someone that just needs to hold another bubble machine. Put them out off to the sides so they're not interfering with like the guests. So those are reasons why, like, for me, this is a 2.
I didn't even notice this guy, but now it has me questioning, is he a vendor, or is he someone helping, pack up the DJ equipment? Or is he a wedding guest that just showed up inappropriately dressed? And, this image, they're going to look at it and always be like, why did Jerry come to our wedding dressed like that?
For sure. If it is Jerry, then for sure. What usually happens, and especially because usually what at least what I experience is like sometimes these shots are very late at the very end of the night. And so a lot of the guests have already left. And so you try to fill in the frame with maybe whoever you've got, or you try to get a couple extra people. That's what it looks like to me, is like there's not that many people left. So they're getting some help. And that's fine. Just don't give him that spot where it's like right next to the bride's hair and back.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned, I would have gotten this guy to hide behind them, or you're trying to get more people. And so we got some other guys that were from the band. Never once in my career of shooting weddings for 10 years did I ever have a say in any of that? I don't think I might have told people line up here and I need you guys to do this, but I don't think I was very aware of what the people in the line were doing, who was there, trying to hide people. I literally had a lighting setup, which was very similar to this, that I would just do every time. I would have a second photographer shooting the opposite direction, and we would try to hide behind the couple. But in terms of like planning this out too much, for me, it was never about that. It was like, I hope all of my gear works correctly so that I can get the exposure. But what the people are doing there, like, that's their thing. If this guy is already changed out of his wedding clothes and he's now there, like, I don't even know that I'd be aware of it until I got back to the computer and I was like, what was that guy doing? I don't know. It's a very hectic moment. It's when you're the most tired. It's when everybody's kind of ready to get out of there. The venue's ready for you to get out of there. So to me, it wasn't the most important image to take throughout the day, but to me, this was one of the more stressful images because of all of those factors. Everyone talks about how the first kiss at the aisle is, there's so much pressure. And I was like, I almost always got that shot. That wasn't really the one I was worried about. It was this where they tell you, hey, we're leaving in 2 minutes. And you're like, oh my gosh, we got to come up with something. But
totally.
Yeah. So I don't know that I mind the blue look versus the warm. I shot like that quite a bit. You were talking about how it doesn't look natural. I mean, I do agree with you. I think the strobe needs to be a stop brighter in the back, or maybe even 2 stops brighter, just to kind of pull it all together a little bit.
They're so bright, and everyone else, including the bubbles, are dark compared to what they should be, and the people are so dark.
Do you think you could fix that in post just by like maybe pulling up the highlights, and now with the masking we were just talking about, like keep all of those adjustments off of them, but just bring up the shadows a little bit more? And,
you could for the bubbles, but there's like I would have brought the ambient exposure up probably like almost 2 stops, so that the shadows on my subjects, the shadows on the people around them would not be nearly as deep, right?
Yeah. And
then brighten the flash in the background, because if you bring everything up right now, you're gonna have like really awkward shadows and all sorts of stuff on people, and they're too muddy. So you could bring the bubbles up for sure, but you'd have a hard time bringing the people up without making it muddied. That one's from Jess Lawrence. Thank you, Jess.
All right, Jose Gomez. This is shot in front of the Cathedral and Santo Domingo. I should know how to say that. That's right next door to us. Here in the Dominican Republic, pigeons flying on the foreground, and that's it. He just wrote enough to qualify being in this critique. You have to write how you took the image and the thought process behind it, and I feel like there was enough here, but I do want to see more in the future. So please tell us how you actually photographed your images. Have you been to the DR?
No.
I hear really good things. So many people vacation there, and being so close to the DR, I feel like I should experience it sometime soon.
It doesn't. There's something about this doesn't feel right to me. Like in terms of like the pigeons, it feels photoshopped. I don't know for certain, but it doesn't feel quite right.
You think they've added more pigeons, or?
I think so.
This one here, some of these in the foreground would be kind of hard to add, just because cutting out a blurry pigeon and then putting it in is more difficult than putting in one that's sharp in the background somewhere. But I don't know. It could just be a lot of pigeons.
It's not to the point where like anyone. I'm not even going to discount it because of that, because I don't feel like it's to a point where anyone else would care. Like I think this is only a photographer would scrutinize that. Nobody else is going to scrutinize it. But so it's convincing enough. There's a few reasons that I'm going to give it the number that I'm going to give it. But all right, what you got?
I'm going to go 3, 2, 1. I still think, I don't know if like, to me, exotic images are so cool. If you live in the DR and you shoot this all the time, maybe this still makes your portfolio. I mean, I gave it a 3, but to me, I would be thrilled if I got an image like this on a destination wedding, because I feel like this would go in my portfolio. The biggest issue I have is I call this the second shooter syndrome, where it looks like you weren't the main photographer, or even you stumbled onto the scene, because the way the couple is looking, not at each other, but at anywhere else, it feels like the photographer's to the right and you just happen to be there, or you're holding a light and you're snapping some pictures with your other hand or something. I feel like that's the biggest weakness of this image, is just like, I want them to be looking at each other or looking at you, or it just feels like all their attention is to another photographer. Like, that's immediately what I read into this.
I agree. For me, it's a great image. I like that they frame them in the arch of the building. So she's kind of framed more on the shadow side. He's framed a little more on the highlight side. It's a beautiful job framing. I would correct the building lines are a little bit crooked. The things that I would do is obviously that the exact same thing on the pose. That to me is one of the biggest distractions, is wondering, like, what are they looking at? Is it another photographer? Are they looking at something else? But it takes me right out of the frame with what they're doing. And it doesn't feel like they're looking at the birds either. The other aspect to this is like, and again, you could do this with the light in camera. The light quality in this scene is so beautiful already that you could just do the rest of this in the edit basically. But I'd want them to be a little bit brighter and the background a little bit darker, because right now they're blending into the background because they're not quite as bright as the building behind them. So I would pull it down just a little bit to lift them up. The rest of it just feels a little bit off with the pigeons. And one thing too is if you're shooting with pigeons or anything moving objects, I'm hoping you're using a fast frame rate, because what I would do is I would layer a couple images and Photoshop out the pigeons that are like right next to their heads. So that way there's an open space and we don't have like birds kind of competing for, that one right to the right, and probably the big black one right to the left. I would nix a couple of those to clean up the space around them.
That's the area where generative fill is the most valuable to me. It's not necessarily extending reality in areas where you might be changing reality. It's doing really complex edits where you could try to clone this arch and put it, like, getting rid of this bird would be a nightmare. But with AI cloning now, it's just boom, you just select it and it's gone. And I think you're absolutely right. Just get rid of the one here. Would be a little tricky, but it would do such a great job. You can just highlight that and get rid of it.
Definitely.
What I like to do sometimes, we've mentioned several times about making the background a little darker, like not much, maybe a third of a stop, 2/3 of a stop, one full stop at most, is I like to make the images really small and just quickly glance at it and think, if this was on a Instagram feed and someone's scrolling through, would they know what's happening right there? And I think if you could make this whole background just 2/3 darker and keep them bright to where you recognize people in front of an old Spanish style building, it would make it stronger. And sometimes I lose sight of that when I zoom in, because so much of the image is right up in my face. It's very easy to see what's going on here. But the second I make it small and I just look on a monitor or something, I'm like, I don't know that would stop me in my tracks.
Yeah, no, I agree.
So you gave this a 2 or a 3?
I gave it a 3. It's a good image. I do think that those birds aren't real, but
it'd be interesting to know.
At least a lot of them
one other thing I just want to mention is, if you are a photographer and you didn't just stumble across this, but you're the assistant, this would be an amazing shot that I'm glad my assistant took the time to do. Because so many times my assistants, when I'm doing these pictures, once we have it dialed in, they're on their phone or they're talking to the bridesmaids, or like they're being social, which I love an assistant who's social and kind of brings the whole group together and makes everyone feel like we're on the same team as them. But I love even more when they can grab an image like this that's from a different angle than what I'm shooting, because when you're doing the album or the slideshow, it's just one more, you're talking about shooting, wide, medium, tight. Shooting from a different angle is something I can't do. And so I really appreciate when these kind of images are taken by my assistant.
Definitely.
All right, we got a car here. This is Steve Wilson. This photo is taken without a flash. Do you think this image was taken without a flash?
Without a flash.
And it was almost completely dark out. It was shot on the Canon 5D. The reason for the backlight. No, this is interesting. The reason there is a flash in this image is the original official wedding photographer had their flash snap in half earlier during the reception. And so they allowed her to use their flash. That's when you are appreciative of other photographers on, at the wedding. You steal their gear. And right when they took the picture themselves, the photographer caught the flash going off on the other camera.
Got it.
Have you had that happen before? You've surely
I have.
had that happen.
That is possible to catch at a frame. I mean, So it was taken with flash. It's just not the
Their
flash.
flash.
You weren't controlling it. It just happened to land.
All right, you ready
There,
to
it looks
rate
like you can see the
this?
official photographer right there.
Yeah, oh, right here. Yep.
Yeah.
You ready to rate this?
Yeah.
All right, 3, 2, 1.
We're
Now,
synced
we
up
have to
still.
say, I think you said this before, but a 2 doesn't mean that the couple isn't going to be thrilled with the photo and that it doesn't need to be delivered. It just means, does it reach the threshold of this should be in your portfolio, meaning the 40 wedding images that you have on your website, front and center, does this make the cut? I would
Totally.
say, sounds like you would say too, no.
Yeah, I don't know that I would. This wouldn't make the cut for the front of my portfolio. It's a good shot for the clients, but it lacks like the emotional depth that I want. Like I want every image that if I'm going to post something to Instagram, if I'm going to post it in my portfolio on my website, I want it to have like emotional depth. Like I want it to create a response. I don't get that from this image. It's a nice scene. It's a great shot for them, but like the expressions are kind of like wah wah. It's not anything like to be, like he looks like he's almost bored. He's holding the
She's pretty good. He looks bored, and then the dad in the background, my eye keeps going to him like he's ready to
yeah.
wrap this day up.
Like it'd be different if everybody in the background's like cheering and they're about to drive off. Maybe they're looking at each other. You've also got the A-frame of the car that's like blocking a good portion of her face. So I would have pulled bring the camera to the right a little bit or to the left a little bit so the A-frame is cleared from the face. But those are the things that are kind of preventing it from being standout to me. Is it mainly is expression and like we could give them a little bit of directing and cueing in this moment to like kind of pull it off. Now I will say this. I have no idea what that other photographer is doing, but I guarantee that shot that it looks like it's someone in a dress. So I guarantee the shot that she's shooting is not a good shot. It looks like she's shooting like with that direct flash. So this angle is a much better angle based on where you're lighting from, and it's very likely going to be a much stronger shot as well. And it's just lucky that you got the flash to kind of incorporate.
So
in there.
you saved the day by donating your on-camera flash to the official photographer, only for them to park themselves at the back license plate and point the flash directly at the car.
Right? Like exactly the shot that she's getting from there, and it's not good.
Maybe she is the. I think she's the main photographer. Maybe she's the assistant, and the other photographer is somewhere else. I don't know. I do know there is a bias that I have, this emotional bias that I get, where if I catch an off-camera flash by accident and it completely changes the vibe that I was getting, I tend to want to save it in like it's a special moment. And imagine the shot without that flash going off. Like it would be very flat and even less exciting. So sometimes I know for me personally, if I had this serendipitous moment where I caught the flash, like I would try to like massage the image more than I normally would. So I feel like maybe that's what's happening here is you want to love the shot a little bit more because this crazy thing happened. But for all the reasons we just named, I don't know that this is like going to go on your website.
Yeah, one other thing I would say is the headlights and the dodging on the wheels is really distracting. Like the headlights are like almost green. There's a little bit too much funny business there.
All right, let's move on to our next image. We're starting to get into more images that are a shot of the day of, which I think is important to show here.
Oh, that's cute.
This is Carlos Alvarado. My bride wanted to show off her Jimmy Choos, so she started dancing with her bridesmaid, shot with the Lumix S5 II and a 35 1.8 natural light. This is, were you ever a member of, what was it called? It was
Fearless?
WPJA, Fearless. Any of these organizations where they used to have these big photo competitions, mainly for wedding photography, these are the type of images that were always featured. And this was kind of the style that I wanted to produce outside of all the flashy stuff that we've kind of seen throughout this critique. So,
yeah.
I think I'm ready.
Okay.
3, 2, 1. You give it a 4. I give it a 3. I'll tell you right off the bat what I struggle with here is that I think this is a great image. I think this is an amazing image that she's going to love. But I always question, like, it's so much leg and even a part of her ass. Like, at what point? There was another image that you could go, if you go to if you go to our contest page, you could see where I think it was the top photographer has a shot of the bride being swung during the first dance, and the dress is coming up, and it's almost showing a butt cheek, and it's an amazing shot. But there's times where I just wonder, is there a chance that this image, I don't think it's going to offend a bride. I think that's not giving brides enough credit, but if it ever teetered on that edge of being just a little too controversial for me personally, I would not put that image on my website. I would definitely give it to the bride and groom, but I wouldn't put it on the front of my page. And I feel like I kind of struggle with that. Maybe I view this as a great image, but I'm also torn of, like, if you're just scrolling through this, is this going to get you excited about hiring me? I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Dude, I freaking love this shot. Like, I would completely disagree with everything you just said.
Okay.
I mean, to me, it's like what you just said to me is almost like disempowering. Like, I feel like if a bride wore this robe and she's been busting her ass working out and she's getting up and dancing, like she wants to, I do agree with you. Like, you know, if it's a mid dance shot and we accidentally got an angle that shows off her hoo-ha, then, like, yeah, like, let's not like publish that, right? But for me, this is like kind of sexy. It's in the moment. It's she's been putting in the work. I'm sure she chose this outfit. Like I want to grant her that kind of, I guess that power just to show it off. The only thing for me that's holding it back from being a 5 is I would have, you know, just done a tiny bit of coaching and maybe just had an angle where I can see, I just want to see more of the girls' faces and their reactions to it in the background. I love that they're blurred out. I love the story that this is telling. To me, it would have been a 5 if we had this great action in the bride, and then we don't need to see the rest of her body, but to see the girls reacting to it, I think would have made it a 5. But as is, I think it's fantastic, and it's a really great storytelling image.
Real quick, if you were to put an image like this up on your portfolio, this isn't that edgy, but maybe you might have some that are just slightly more edgy, or a girl getting in her dress, and it doesn't really show anything, but like, would you ask the bride for permission to post this? Or do you feel like this is anonymous enough that the only people that would really know is you and her, and she'd have no problem with it? Or is it a case by case? What is your thoughts on that?
To me, this is very much like a branding question. So, like, if you're known for this, like if your images are very much journalistic, in the moment, you're showing what it is, you're showing the action, you've got shots like this all over your website, and your clients are hiring you, there's an expectation of this, right? If what you're showing is mostly like traditional stuff and it's more, which is like for Lynn and Jirsa, that is what we're mostly shooting. It's more traditional. It's more like, you know, very flattering. It's more on that side because that is the branding for the business. Then in our case, we would ask, because this would be a little bit like over the top, right? Compared to what the client wouldn't be expecting it, is what we're saying. So granted, like if you're my friends, two man, Lanny and Erica, dude, they shoot shots of people in the shower. It's all over their website. Like they show asses, they show people like doing all sorts of crazy stuff. That's what they're known for. And so for them, it's like, no, you wouldn't need to ask permission. That's what is expected if they're going out and shooting.
Wow. Who was that? I need to look at their images, just because that seems like such a wild direction to go for wedding photography. Or are they doing boudoir or something?
No, wedding photography. Like they show their whole branding and emphasis is like, we show you as humans, as who you are, the fun, the badassery, like all of it. And like, we're going to show it all off. So the clients that go to them very much are like, we love to party, we love to hang out, we love to get crazy. And that's what they want captured, you know?
Interesting. All right, moving on. This is from Paul Tansley. This is the flower girl. Daughter of the bride hated wearing dresses and was a total tomboy, so she buried her head in the sofa to make a bit of a scene. But I was the only one who really noticed. This was taken in the UK. So another kind of photojournalistic image that when I first saw this photo, it made me stop and think, what is going on? Is this the bride? What is happening here? Is this a sad moment? Is this an exhausted moment? Is this something isn't going right and it's a stressful moment? And then I read the story and it is a little more common. Okay, it's the flower girl, but I always like images where it makes me stop and question things. If you can get me to stop and think about an image for a while, I think regardless of what is actually going on, like that's a good quality to have in a photo.
I agree. Let's hit it.
All right. So I think this is, it's kind of hard for me to rate these. I think this is a solid image. I just think like to go in your portfolio, it's like not quite there maybe. I just think
Is
a bride would be.
Or is 3, what is 3?
3 is definitely, it's a solid image that belongs in your portfolio.
Okay.
I think this image just needs a lot of explaining, or your clients might be confused if they see this on their own, like I was. I was kind of wondering, is this a bride who's having a horrible day? And if so, I do not want to show my potential clients that at all. It might be an award-winning image on another scale, but in terms of a portfolio used for marketing, which is the way I'm approaching this critique, I wouldn't want my clients or potential clients to have any question about what's going on. But that being said, I do love this image. So I'm kind of torn between, it's a 2, doesn't belong in your portfolio, but it's a solid 3 image in the way that it's actually taken and what it's saying, I guess.
I think I'd agree with everything you just said, actually. I'd probably change my number a little bit after you explain it that way. Because, yeah, I wouldn't, this photo doesn't quite make sense. But here's the tricky thing, is if suddenly you kind of knew she was pouting, like if you can see some sort of expression, if you knew she was pouting and like you knew what was happening, to me, it goes from like a 2 to a 4 or 5, like instantly. So like, that's the hard part, is like, it's so close. But I do agree that like without context, you don't know what's happening in this image. And that's what makes it, it's great. I love the black and whiting. I love the angle that you took, the highlights that we see, and the way that you kind of dodged and burned and brought attention to her. But you're right, though, like without context, it doesn't make sense in a portfolio. And so by that standard, we'd have to give it like a 2. But it's still a really cute shot. And if I were the parents of this girl, I would absolutely love it.
I know we can't control these moments. There's definitely things that you can do to encourage a moment, or like you said, if the girl's dancing with her shoes on, you could kind of tell the bridesmaids, why don't y'all get in this position before she does that, and kind of coach it. This situation, you just caught it going on in the corner and you took an image of it. If the bride had been right here by the window and it was just a hint of her in her dress, looking out the window, getting ready, doing anything that just like told you that, oh, this is not the bride, I think like that could make it a 3 or 4, or maybe even a 5, if there was just the idea of another bride, the bride was in here. Sorry, my power just went out and now everything is beeping at me. And
oh, is that what's going on?
Puerto Rico, man. It's never just an easy moment. So
one of the things that I do like to do in moments like this with my own family is, if you know the girl's name, you just call their name, like Haley, and then they poke their head up with like that sad look, and then that's when I capture the shot. I do that with my daughter all the time.
All right, we got just a few more left here. This is by Jaco Perala. This image was shot in a hotel where the couple was getting ready. When I got to the room, I immediately noticed the window and started to think of this shape as a leading line and how it could go through their heads. I also think it's the fact that the couple is looking at their hands makes it a more powerful image, shot with an R6, 35 millimeter 1.4.
All right, I got a number.
Me too. 3, 2, 1. I'm between a 3 and a 4. I'm going to go 4 just because knowing that that's a real window and it's not some kind of like photoshopped shape, I think that's like, it's all about the aesthetic of the design, right? Like the way that you've cropped this, and it's not so much the people in the moment and everything. It's really when you come across this on your feed or a portfolio, it just looks like art, fine art or something, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Definitely like a portfolio worthy. I'll tell you this. There's just a few things like I could see you giving it a 4. I'm on a 3 because there's a few things that I think would turn this into a 5. One is fixing the train on her dress. So like the train actually sits in a way that looks like nice and natural. Whereas right now,
this one right here.
Yeah. So you could unhook the train because it looks like it's still clasped to her leg. And actually just lay it out so you can see the full train right there. I like the pose and the expression. I think that's beautiful. I love the framing. The other thing that I would do to make this just a killer image is, this is, to me, is a perfect place for generative fill. And all you do is you expand the left and right sides of the image. You can even expand the entire thing and just fill the rest of it with more black. Negative space would just knock it through the, like, to me, would just be incredible in this image, because you just showcase it's all black and negative space with this one shape in the middle with them inside of it. And I think that would just kill it.
That is a really useful technique with generative fill, is if the exposure is going to go dark anyway, then what does it matter if you just add more?
Exactly.
I mean, I kind of like the vertical composition. I feel like in my overall portfolio of images throughout a day, or, shots throughout the day, the vertical image gets like 25% at best. So it's kind of nice to see vertical images. You ever have to hang a picture in your house and you realize everything you have is horizontal, but you need a vertical, and I never have that one.
I shoot a lot of vertical for that exact reason, because when you're getting to the framing and the albums, and you need them. But I love this image. It's a great image, and that's why I'm like, it's a portfolio image. But I think this could be potentially award winning with those two little adjustments.
All right, we have our final two, and then we will pick our winners here.
Oh goodness, do I got to pick the?
I'll pick the grand prize winner so that you have no say in your own prize, and then you can pick the other two.
That would be nice. Oh, this is beautiful.
This is Anna Kafka. This image captures the bride and groom immersed in the rough beauty of the Icelandic landscape. The fading rays of the midnight sun cast a unique glow upon the couple as the surroundings gradually faded into shadow. The wind billows dramatically through the bride's dress.
Beautiful.
Sony A7 III f2 on an 85 millimeter lens. This is a very non-traditional wedding dress.
Yeah, he's not in traditional wedding attire either. He's got pants on with a
tennis shoes, and are you ready?
Ready.
3, 2, 1. 4.
4 and 4. Dude, I love this. Whatever, is it Anna? Who shot this? Yeah, Anna
Kafka.
Okay. Anna, like, whatever she's doing at the bottom left of the frame, like, it looks like she's holding some sort of foreground object, maybe a bit of veil or something like that. That's beautiful. I love the softening effect that creates. Composition, I love that they're placed in kind of the dip in the mountains, so the mountains kind of like drop into them. I think the only thing holding this back from being a 5 for me is I would shoot this rapid fire, and there's a couple things. I would bring his hands just a little bit lower on the nape of her neck so that you can see a little bit more of her profile. And maybe have her bring her chin up just a little bit so her lips and neck it's mainly her lips and chin is not fully blocked out. I'd also lift the shadows a bit, because the shadows are getting a little bit deep, where it's almost like we can't quite see the detail on their faces. The last thing, though, is I would rapid fire this shot so that you get a perfect pull in the dress. So like what you're looking for is that wind to come through and just get this nice flow in the dress where it like elongates and doesn't fold back over itself. So that way you can kind of exaggerate the shot a bit. Those things, to me, if those things were added, this would be a 5 for me. I can't really say anything about like his. I wish he was wearing like a little bit nicer pants and shoes, but like it looks like this is their style, and I feel like that's a subjective thing. So for an adventure couple, like there's no issue with that. That's a kind of subjective thing to me. But
would you ever go as far as pulling this into Photoshop and just starting to make the blacks the same tonality so that the edge of the sneaker and maybe the sock is like, I'm not saying you're manipulating the truth. You're just kind of like burning it down to where, it doesn't, I mean, there's not much you could do here about this heel of the sneaker. It's right in the sunlight and you're going to be able to tell that it's a sneaker. But I feel like it's this little transition here to where if it was all just kind of crushed, I mean, she's got hiking boots on, so I mean, maybe all of this is
I can see it on her feet. That's actually where I saw it first, was on hers. It's the shape against her ankle that kind of made me. The shape against her ankle is what made me look at his. I wouldn't change it, dude. If they're wearing that, like I would just embrace it.
It really doesn't. In this image, doesn't bother me all that much, just because everything about this feels alternative, for a better word. I mean, he's got a very different haircut than you would normally think of a groom having. her dress is very untraditional, non-traditional. They're
For
hiking
sure.
gear. They're in these mountains. This shot's already like a crazy shot. I don't know that the veil here bothers me. Sometimes, like if it's too perfect and it looks like the assistant has dropped it and told you to fire, like that
Yeah.
almost takes me out of it sometimes. We had a lot of submissions like that where the veil and the dress are just floating and it's like, it's too much for me. This feels natural. This feels like if you're in Iceland on a hillside like this, maybe that was how the dress flowed. I do agree with what you're saying. I wish his arm was down just a little bit more.
Yeah.
But
It's
I don't
beautiful
know
though.
if you print this and put it on your wall. Like it's very hard to print certain wedding images and just permanently put them in your house. It kind of feels a little, for me, it feels a little vain. Even though I have a bunch of them down our bedroom hallway, this is one of those artsy shots where I feel like this could be timeless. Because what happens is you have kids, and then you replace the wedding pictures with the kids, and then as they grow up, it's just a whole thing. So this is one of those images where I feel like it's so nice that it would stay on the wall for a very long
Yeah.
time.
No, it's a great shot. That's beautiful.
All right, and then our final image. The top 7 or 8 images in this critique, at least rated by our community, were all taken by like the same 3 photographers. So I don't know if they've gamed the system. All of their images were incredible. And so Wilder Cordova took 2 or 3 of those, and I just happened to pick this one because I thought it was the most interesting one that he took. This was shot with a Nikon
Beautiful.
D810 with a Sigma Art 135 1.8
Let's
lens.
zoom in on
Wow.
this one. Give it a look. It's a gorgeous shot.
He used a bare flash as a backlight triggered with the Yongnuo trigger. We were in a wheat field, and the couple was just under a molly tree in Bolivia. We were lucky because we had a bit of rain, which allowed all the little drops to be highlighted by the flash.
This falls. I'm going to unfairly score this one because it falls into exactly what I would do in a scene like this. This is
This
beautiful.
does seem like your style here. Have you? I say have you? I know you have because you've shot so many weddings. You've shot those weddings where the ceremony takes place outside at night, or they wrap
Yeah.
up and it's pitch black, and you're like, I have to take pose pictures, and it's blackout. I can't even see this tree, but I know it's there.
Yeah,
It's
for
it's
sure.
a challenging situation where flash is really your only savior at that point.
For sure. All right, you ready?
I'm ready. 3, 2, 1. I'm between a 4 and a 5. I can see why you gave this a 5. This is
I
an
mean,
incredible image.
it's in my opinion, everything that you did here is exactly like the way that, and that's maybe I'm giving a little bit of a bias score, but this is exactly what I would do. I would, knowing that it's a little bit rainy, I would be backlighting. Also, I'd use that backlight. If I'm going under the tree, I'd be like, okay, I'm going to place the backlight a bit far away enough that it's going to illuminate the tree and also light up the grass. I'm going to shoot low and frame them against the grass where there's an opening in the tree, and we're going to use the tree itself to kind of frame them. The backlight's going to light everything up. He might have even used 2 backlights in this because I might even use 2 backlights, one even further back to illuminate more of the scene if you couldn't get it with just one. I love the CTO gel that's being used to kind of create a bit of warmth to it. And it looks like there's a hint of blue. And so that could be like, if you use 2 lights, you can make one wider with that orange gel and then one closer that's not gelled. So you get a hint of blues coming through. And it's perfectly done. And then I would put them in action so it doesn't just feel like a static image. It's beautiful. This is award winning to me. This is like, I would change nothing about this. I love that she's caught mid pose, but you can still see her face. You can still see him.
Do you think one strobe has enough of a throw to light this tree? Like, that's so crazy that they were able to, like you
That's
said,
why I'm
maybe it's
saying
just so
it
far
probably
away.
is too. So because of the way that they're lit, so look at that. Do you see how there's blooming around them and then blooming in the dress where you can see like almost atmosphere being lit up?
Yeah.
Most likely there's a flash actually placed close to them directly behind. This is how I would do it. I would place a flash relatively close, like maybe 6 feet behind her. And now that's the one that's going to bloom. And then I place a second flash, probably like 20, 30 feet behind them, like much deeper into it. And that would be the wider flash that's going to hit the background.
I mean, from his write-up, it sounds like he just used one. So
If that's the case, then awesome. It's possible. I just, that would be the way I would approach it. if I can't get enough light.
Very exciting. So let me go ahead and let's figure out who won everything here. I'm going to, should I let you choose the third and second place, and I will choose the
So
grand
tell me,
prize.
what was the third place prize?
Third place is just a tutorial from our store, and that could be anything from wedding photography or your Lightroom course, or a completely different genre if you just want to learn from somebody who does a totally different style of photography.
And what's second place?
Second place is the CT Loop Deck. Have you used that?
Oh yeah, I have the Loop Deck CT. That's a good one. Okay.
So that just is kind of a workflow tool where you can speed up your editing and do a bunch of stuff with it.
All right, let's do the couple over the ocean scene. Go down the ocean cliffside scene. That's going to be third place, mainly because like we talked about, like this could be all done in post and like the edit. So like I think maybe a tutorial might be useful to that person.
Perfect. And then second place, the Loop Deck CT customizable controller.
Oh man, I'm going to go to that tree image. Like, let's give them the Loop Deck CT, because if you can edit quicker and make more awesome stuff like this, Wilder, then go for it.
All right. And then now I got to pick the grand prize winner. Here's where I'm stuck. Do I pick an amazing image or someone who could learn the most from you?
Well, the thing is, like, being good at photography and being good in the business of photography are two completely different skill sets. So we actually say, like, look, we want you to be taking good photos before you enroll in like the mentorship, because the mentorship is focused on like becoming good in the business of photography. And we kind of need you to be creating good work at that point.
I'm going to go, I think my favorite image of the whole critique is this one here by Manolo Sierra. This image is so incredible. And it's not just this image. He had two other ones. There was one image that was even ranked higher than this. So he has some incredible images already. And I wish I knew, does it say in his portfolio where he is based out of? He's in Mexico City. So I think congratulations, Manolo. You are the winner of Pi's 12-month course. Hopefully, Pi, you can help him out with a Spanish-speaking market like Mexico City. But if not, I'm sure you have tons of tips that will help him regardless of where he's located.
Yeah, we'll help him out for sure. But great job, Manolo.
All right, so the next critique is going to be for the month of April. And if you haven't already heard, it is portraiture. So head to fstoppers.com/contest where you can enter that. That will wrap up in a few weeks. Pi, anything else you have to pitch? You mentioned the shoot-off that we did. Tell people a little bit about the Impossible Things program that you've been working on, because it's an incredible cloud editing tool that I've been using quite a bit.
Yeah, so for the shoot-off, I came out to Puerto Rico, and aside from doing the challenge, our goal was to build Patrick an AI editing profile that edits in his style. So we built that, and you can actually play with it and use it with Impossible Things. Impossible Things is a plugin for Lightroom that allows you to natively edit inside of Lightroom using AI. So essentially, you just select your images, choose the look that you want to have. You can use Patrick's new profile. You can choose one of your existing presets or choose from our cloud styles, and then just hit go. And the AI is going to run through right there in front of your face all of the edits, making all of the adjustments in that style that you chose. And for anybody that's basically a working professional photographer, like if you do events, if you do portraiture, it's a huge time saver. It's doing 90% plus of all of your editing work on your behalf. You just check them, make sure they're good, do a couple minor adjustments, make your 5-star images, and you're good to go. So it saves a huge chunk of your time when it comes to editing.
I created the Hudson Cloud preset, and I use it all the time now. The biggest question that I've had people ask, and maybe you can answer this right now, what is the difference between just having Lightroom do an auto levels correct versus the AI aspect of this whole system? What is the AI actually doing, and why is it AI and not just an automated button?
Yeah, so it's doing a lot more than what the auto button would do. So when you actually run it with AI, we're actually taking into account like the images that you're shooting, the style that you're trying to shoot with, what is your current white balances. We're looking at images prior, images after, making them cohesive. So it's doing a lot more than just individually essentially guessing or trying to guess what an image edit should be. So again, it's really for photographers that are editing hundreds of images. If you're just editing one or two images, there's not really a huge benefit in it. It's more so if you are, a working studio, basically, a working photographer.
Yeah, I've noticed running, my preset through a bunch of images. It's almost like it's taking a look that I like and then making it even better on an image per image or like mini session by mini session basis. That's the best way I can describe it. I don't know what's going on in the back end, but it's definitely way better than just taking a preset and hitting go and then realizing that the preset doesn't really work with this image set. It feels like it works every single time, which is a total game changer for the way that I edit, because I don't want to spend a lot of time editing pictures.
Definitely. And it's free to try, by the way. So the best way to kind of learn it is just grab it, watch the getting started video, and you get 500 images just to start playing with.
Well, I'll put a link to that in the description as well. We have a lot of links down below. I really appreciated this. It was great hearing from you and getting your insight on these wedding images. I think people found that really useful. And again, next month is the portrait contest. It's actually this month for April. And we're giving away a really good lighting kit by Westcott, as well as some DxO software, and of course, another Fstoppers tutorial. So I will see you guys really soon. Thanks for joining us, Pi, and have a good weekend.
See you guys.